Imagine you've got an Amiga 500 in your collection, and while you've been happy running games from floppy or from ADF, you think it's about time to upgrade it. You think it's time to add a hard drive. So you go out and buy yourself an accelerator, say the likes of a Spitfire 500 or a TF536, because either of those have an onboard IDE slot. You've put that in your machine, you've put your CF card in there, but how do you know when it's actually reading off that drive? You see, the 500 here only has two LEDs on the front, power and drive. That is specifically just the floppy drive. The later Wedge machines though, be it the 600 or the 1200, well, they have three LEDs, power, floppy drive and hard drive. But is there anything we can do to this machine to give us a third LED? Well, not really, without drilling holes in the case. But what about if we doubled up on that drive LED? Could we make that work for both the hard drive and the floppy drive? Well, that's exactly what this little project aims to do. So let's put it together and see how it works. So this project is the A500 IDE LED board by Jorgen Bilander. In fact, it was the very man himself who sent us this kit. In fact, it was Jorgen who created the Spitfire 500 that we built previously here on the channel. And while this kit might be intended to sit alongside that accelerator, it will work with any accelerator so long as it has an IDE slot, because we're going to be picking up the IDE activity signal from pin 39 on that header. Although before we do put this together, you can maybe see here that he has very kindly sent us a couple of these actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what I'll maybe do actually is just assemble all of these, although we'll only do one today. And I'll just give these out to the other guys that were in the Spitfire 500 group buy. But before we do put it together, let's jump over to the GitHub and take a look at how it works. So this is the GitHub page. You can download the Gerbers to get these built within releases here. But if we just take a look down this, the A500 IDE LED board. Amiga 500 floppy LED to display IDE activity 2. Connect the fly lead from IDE pin 39 to J4 on the LED board. If U1 is not populated, otherwise connect to J3. Well, he has given us everything we need here. So I think ultimately we'll be connecting it just to J3. But let's take a look at the schematic, see if we can understand that a bit better. So relatively straightforward. You can see here, this section is marked as optional. So if you didn't fit that, you would be connecting your activity LED to J4, which in itself would just be directly driving the base pin on a PNP transistor. The IDE activity signal is driven low when it's active. So in that scenario, J4 will go low. That will turn on the PNP, basically sending VCC or 5 volt to drive LED. Whereas the other option has us fit a 74H CT2G14. So that is a 2-gate hex inverter, basically just buffering that signal then. So come in active low, get inverted to high, back through the other gate, high to low again, and then it's that which is driving the base of the PNP. So yeah, definitely the better solution to fit the buffer on it. By doing so, you're just ensuring that you're not putting any load onto that signal. Not that you're really putting any load onto it anyway. I mean, all it would be doing is driving the base of the PNP, but definitely doesn't do any harm to buffer it. Otherwise, this is just a straight through connector in terms of the keyboard and the drive LED signal, you know, in terms of it showing a floppy access. That's just straight through from connector 1 to connector 2. We're basically just injecting this additional drive LED activity from the little circuit that's on these. But yeah, that's enough waffling from me. Let's put one of these together. To assemble this, I think I'm just going to use a bit of solder paste, certainly for all the surface mount stuff. Although here's a question, where's pin 1 on this hex inverter? I can't really make out any writing on the top of that. Let me grab the microscope. Hopefully you can make that out okay. I'm just recording the screen of the scope here. But you can see just in that bottom right hand corner there is a dot there, very small, but it is there just beside that pin, so that must be pin 1. Which actually coincides with the layout of the IC on the board here. You might be able to see it because the solder paste is in the way, but if I grab another one, pin 1 is denoted just by the slightly longer line in that bottom right hand corner beside that pod. That needs to go on like that. And yes, I do think that is way too much solder paste that I've put on there, but we can always touch it up later using the iron. The other components though, they're all pretty self-explanatory. There's a transistor, it only can go on one way. It doesn't matter which way the capacitor goes, it's just a ceramic doing a bit of decoupling. And then of the 2 resistors we need, this one is 10k, that is 4.7. Of the parts provided, these ones don't have any label on them, but these ones say 10002, that is 10k. And again, it doesn't really matter which way these go on. Right, a little bit of hot air. I have this running at about 360 degrees with a medium sort of air speed because we want this solder paste to go off, but we don't want to move any of the components with too fast of air. And that's it. Although, as I thought, we have created a bit of a mess around U1 there. Big blobs of solder. So we'll throw a bit of flux on it. And I'll just reflow it quickly with the iron. There, I think that's it. In terms of the through-hole stuff then, this pass-through connector, it goes on the bottom side of the board in the position J2. Just need to make sure that it's sitting nice and straight. And yeah, that's not bad. I did try to clean that very quickly and I've just made an absolute mess of it. There's flux all over it, but we'll clean it properly once I'm done. Then we need to take a bit of pin strip. We need 8 of these. This is ultimately going to go in there to give you something to plug the A500 keyboard cable into. But as I'm sure you know, that keyboard cable is keyed, as in there's one pin missing on it, which is pin 5. So we need to pull that out. But also to make sure that this fits properly, we need to push all the rest of those pins through a bit so that more of them are exposed. Something like that. It just gives the keyboard cable something better to grip onto. And looking at the board like this, the 3 pins go on the left, the 4 pins go on the right. I think we got that pretty straight there. Maybe just wants to move a little bit, maybe just like that. Yeah, I think that looks better. So let's try and get the rest of those points soldered. And then the last thing we need to do is fit a right angle pin at position J3. That's where we're going to be connecting up the hard drive activity LED. We have all of those included as well, but I'm just going to pull the shroud off this, and then I'm going to try and make that off just like so. Put a bit of flux on it just so that we get a decent joint. This is a terrible balancing act. I probably should have put this into my little jig for holding PCBs. In fact, I'll just need to do this by hand, won't it? Try not to burn myself. There. Oh no, it moved. Let's try that again. There. I think that's pretty good. Yeah, I'm happy enough with that. Although the only thing I'm going to do is just trim off the excess of that leg. That's it done. Bit of a clean up, and then we can test it. But rather than test this in my Amiga, and I did say I'd build one of these for everyone who was involved in the Spitfire 500 group buy, So one such person was Keith from Yawning Angel Retro, and I'm actually meeting him this weekend over at Retrofest. So let's bring this with us and we'll try to fit it to Big Red over in Swindon. This turned into quite the journey, as it was a quick trip to the airport, and we jumped on this EasyJet heading to Bristol. Then to the coach park to grab a bus into the town. And finally on the train taking us to Swindon. "7 hours, but we're there." The next morning then we made our way to STEAM, the Museum of the Great Western Railway in Swindon. That's where Retrofest was being held again, down this corridor in the Hawksworth Hall. But before things got started, I went and found Keith. We tried to fit the LED board into Big Red.
So many times the last few weeks.
Yeah, you get used to taking them apart, don't you?
Yeah, well, there's a screw that goes in there. I've never bothered to put it back in because it's such a faff to try and get it out. Right.
Okay.
I need a game.
We might have a problem.
Oh no.
So this has to sit in line with the keyboard, and then that plugs in like that, and then that plugs into there, but it might foul your HDMI cable.
Yes.
Well, we can try it.
It's the weekend. It's not like everyone's using it. It should have.
So that plugs in there. And that will have to plug in there. But then I'm not sure if we will get the HDMI back in. Quite well. Yeah, it looks like we're beat.
Oh, that's a nightmare.
It's kind of annoying. Because that plugs in as such, and then we just hook this on to one of the pins on the IDE down there.
Right.
I'm just wondering, does that have a demo?
So this hooks on to pin 39 on this, which is the third one in.
Okay.
Just in there like that. It looks a bit janky, but unfortunately there's no breakout on that board for the IDE signal, so that's the only way to do it really.
Okay.
If you power it up here, right, even though you won't get a display, we'll be able to see that working.
Okay. Okay. Here goes.
Right, so we should see hard drive activity on this LED. There you are.
Oh my god, look at that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So it does work, but we unfortunately have the fitment problem. I'm going to leave Keith to think about that while we take a quick look around Retrofest. It is quite amazing just how many people were in this small space. Loads of vendors, loads of people showing off their collection, but I was there with these guys. Andy from HBR, he was showing off his Alicia 1200, the mini ITX build. This is my original Mortal Kombat bootleg arcade PCB. Lee from More Fun Making It was there, showing off two rather dusty looking machines. Then we had Timberwolf with a little Pentium laptop playing one of my all-time favourite games, Transport Tycoon. This Big Red, Keith put it back together so that everyone could have a go at the game he's been working on. Matt from TME Retro brought his Amstrad Sleeper laptop. Very impressive thing when you actually see it in the flesh. Then we had this collection of Wonder Swans on display from Duncan from Retro Crazy. I have to be honest and say I'm not sure who had this machine or even what it was. But just beside that we had this fantastic Acorn A3020 on display from Neil from Retro From You. Neil had some nice stickers there. I think I'll take one of them for myself. Well, we made it home from Retrofest, and yes, that was maybe 6 weeks ago now. So what's delayed this video coming out? Well, Had to wait for Keith to come up with some sort of solution to fit this board inside his 500, and in between times I've been on holiday with the family, so that's what kept it. But speaking of fitting this in his 500, let's hand over to Keith now and let him explain the solution that he's come up with.
Hello, Yawning Angel here with a cup of tea, and we're going to talk about the hard drive indicator light board, which Glenn has assembled based on a design by Jorgen Bilander, if I recollect. And obviously you talk about the problems we had getting that fitted to Big Red at Retrofest. But before we do, I just need a mouthful of tea, and then I'll talk through that process of how I've managed to get it fitted. Right, here we are then. So this is the board. Probably can't see this. It's probably not in focus. So Glenn has kindly assembled that, and we tried to get it fitted at Retrofest, and we couldn't, due to the fact the RGB to HDMI board that's in the machine, the HDMI cable coming out from the Raspberry Pi cut straight across where the keyboard connector would go in, and as a result fitting that to where the keyboard connector goes in as well just raised things up too much. Cable clashed with it, not happy, couldn't get it fitted. Anyway, I have come up with a solution, and I think it will fit okay. So really, literally without further ado, let's get Big Red apart and get it fitted. Okay, so this is what I've got. Let me just move that out of the way quickly. Right, so what I've managed to do in here is the Raspberry Pi has got HDMI out. So I've got a kind of U-bend adapter here coming from mini HDMI into female full HDMI. Then I've got this cable here which connects into there. That cable is trunking all the way around there, under there, and out to the back of the machine where you will connect in your HDMI male socket. And as a result of doing this, it's freed up the space across the keyboard connector. So let me just zoom in a bit and show you what I mean. Okay, so hopefully you can see that a little bit clearer. That space is now cleared up. So what we had before was the HDMI cable was running across the cable that I had. This is a whole new solution. So it's adapter into another cable and then out the back of the machine. So space is freed up. So what I need to do is take out the keyboard connector, and then I can then get on and fit this in place. And in case you're wondering, this little cable here is actually connected to the Spitfire card. I'll show you that in a minute. That connects on to the side in there, and it all should work. Right, let's get the keyboard out. So this connector here is connecting onto one of the pins on the IDE header, and that will connect into that indicator board. Right, so the first thing to do then is to connect this cable to that card. That's gone in there. Now, try and do this without knocking cameras over. So now I need to put this over the pins for the keyboard connector. Make sure they're lined up and just push that into place. Right, then the keyboard cable goes back on. Take your time, make sure it's lined up properly, and just slide that on. Support the board underneath it, but there we go. That's it. So that is in place really nicely. There's loads of clearance here. That is in, everything is connected. So let's get the case back together and get this in front of a monitor, power it up, and see it in action. Right, Big Red is reassembled, all plumbed in, connected. So I'm going to power it up now. We'll see it boot, hopefully. And I'm hoping I've got another camera set up pointing at the floppy access light, indicator light. So hopefully you'll see that flicker as the hard drive is accessed. So I've dropped the lighting as much as I can in here before cameras start complaining. So hopefully you will see that flicker as Big Red boots up. So we're going to boot up right now. There we go. Look at that. It's working. As the hard drive is being accessed, that light is flickering. And there we go. Big Red has booted up successfully and the light works. Let's just fire some software through it just so we can see it accessing again. Brilliant. That's working a treat. Really pleased with that. And really pleased that it was actually quite straightforward to fit once we got the HDMI cables sorted out. So Glenn, a huge thanks, mate. Really appreciate that. Cheers.
You're very welcome, Keith. I'm only glad you were able to come up with that solution and make use of this board. You can now see when your CF card is being accessed inside the 500 just on the drive indicator LED. Fantastic solution, very simple board, but it's true what they say, isn't it? Sometimes the simplest solution is the best. That's going to be it for this video. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed what you've seen, I would appreciate the big thumbs up. If you're not familiar with Keith's channel, Yawning Angel Retro, he does a lot of AMOS programming on his Amiga over there. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would highly recommend going and checking that out. Drop him a sub while you're at it. But that's it from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.